Hi everyone, it's Mushin-Makedonskiy of Business Storytelling again, and today with me is Mark Evans, founder of Mark Evans Consulting and the author of Storytelling for Startups, and really a great guy in marketing. You can rely on him totally. So Mark, thank you so much for being here with me today. And that's not all because I know you've been out on Marketing Spark like this year, I guess. Am I right?
Yes, it's a new book that I published late last year.
Oh, late last year. Great. Okay. So it's so nice to have you here. Thank you for joining me today to talk on storytelling.
You're welcome. Always happy to talk about brand storytelling and why it's important for marketers.
Great. So, Mark, could you tell my subscribers a bit about how you've ended up in ended or started up in storytelling? What do you do as a storytelling guy on the market?
So I've been a storytelling for my entire career. I originally started as a journalist, as a newspaper journalist, for two of Canada's national newspapers, along with Bloomberg News. And so, you know, when you're a reporter, you're telling stories and you're creating stories that the audience wants to hear. And a key part of that is finding things that you think are interesting, not for your audience, not for the businesses, because businesses they have things that they want to tell you.
Yeah.
But that's interesting for the people who are reading or watching or these stories. So it's good. It was great training. At some point in time, I moved into business journalism and writing about technology, and eventually I got recruited by a startup to become their head of marketing. And that was the beginning of my business storytelling career. And so for the past 15 years, I've been crafting business stories for lots of B2B companies, you know, with our audiences in Europe and South America and North America. So in a nutshell, that's my storytelling career.
Great. That's a long way. So you started as an interviewer, and you're now like a business storyteller for startups. You know, that's your main focus.
Yes, like I'm a marketer now. I work for a company called DaVinci Intelligence as the head of marketing. But I would say that I've always been a storyteller, and I've always been trying to tell stories that interest the audience. Because one of the keys to storytelling is thinking about who is your target audience, what are their interests. How can you connect with them emotionally in terms of how do you scare them or excite them or inspire them or make them happy, and crafting stories that are in the places where they want to consume stories. So stories have different shapes and sizes. Some of them are videos, some are infographics, some are blog posts, but they're all stories, and people will consume these stories in different ways depending on you know, how digitally savvy they are or how much time they have.
Great. I know that stories come from different shapes and tools. You know, Paul Smith, one of the storytelling guys from America, he says like the story is a vehicle agnostic tool. So that's what I'm hearing from you right now. That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, could you maybe tell me like a case, that's my story prompt question, a case or a client project where you've used storytelling and you've seen its effectiveness for the client?
So at one point in time, I was working for a company called DaVinci Retail, and what they were trying to do is convince retailers to use their technology. And part of the problem was talking about the technology. They were talking about features, and it wasn't resonating because, to be honest with you, customers don't care about features. They really care about your product, and they say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek because what they care about is themselves. They care about what's in it for me, how are you going to make my life better, what kind of experiences you're going to deliver. And so what we did from a storytelling perspective is we flipped the message from being very product-centric to being customer-centric and focused on the users and said to them, if you used our product, this is what your life could be like. This is what your life could be like, in their case, beyond using Excel, beyond that mind-numbing time. If you use their tool. and that they could connect with consumers more effectively. They could do their jobs better. And it was all about crafting that story that resonated with the end user. That's what we're looking to do with marketing. If we're trying to get the end user to say, that's what I want to do, that's who I want to be, and that's why I need to use your tool.
Great. I love how you're talking not about what I want to get, but what I want to be, like transformational identification. That's great. That's good. That's good stuff. Thank you. Mark, in one of your speeches, like maybe not in one of them, but I love that point you make that the goal of the story, there's actually three of them, to engage, educate, and entertain. And my next question would be, I know that different storytellers pose the goal of the story, like to sell or to influence or to guide. So how do you use your goals to, like, how do they connect?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, as marketers, we're trying to get consumers to do something. So
True.
download the product, use our service, buy our service, watch our advertising, whatever it is. And so we've got to do a couple things. At the end of the day, the big goal is to build a relationship. Once you have a relationship, then anything can happen. People can become customers, they can become evangelists, they can not become customers, but still like your brand and talk about your brand. So the question is, how do you make that happen? And as marketers, we have lots of tools and lots of channels at our disposal, more tools and channels than ever before, which makes marketing exciting, but also very challenging. What do you use?
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is, if we're trying to build relationships, then we're trying to offer marketing that's engaging, marketing that's interesting, that's relevant, that meets their interests and their needs, marketing that helps them learn. So a lot of times, you think about it, the marketing cycle could be the same cycle. For some products, it's a week. For your Dropbox, it's a week, right? But
Yeah.
if you're so you've got to educate people on the way, whether you're educating in a day or educating over a year. About their problems and how I help them and how my product is designed to meet their needs. And then the entertaining thing is an interesting one, because when I say that, people sort of look at me and go, why would I want to entertain my customers? Because at the end of the day, it's all about sort of keeping people, getting people into your story and keeping them interested along the way. So entertainment could be a funny video, or it could be an interesting infographic, or something that's fun, but also educational and also engages them. So it's part of the mix. Now, not every company needs to embrace marketing that's entertaining, but you can do it to some degree. Now, some products, for B2C products, you can entertain in a big way. B2B, not so much. But it's the three pillars. If you use one of the pillars, then you're doing great. Like if you can engage or educate or entertain. If you can use multiple pillars, then your marketing will be that more effective.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not with the story. It's like more of a general focus. So you have to do these three things, and you can do them with a story, but you can do them without a story. Is it right?
You can do lots of things to do with the 3 E's. But my philosophy is that storytelling is integrated into everything that you do. Some storytelling is very blatant, and you go, well, that's a good story, and some of it is less obvious. But stories, think about it, it's all about the customer, right? It's all about making them do something, getting them engaged with you. And so whatever you do, storytelling has to be part of it.
Okay, that's a good philosophy. I love hearing that storytelling, like stories encompass all our activities. Okay, Mark, you said like one more activities I like that modern day clients are distracted, multitasking, and overloaded with information. And you said that stories help us tackle those three like conditions. Could you maybe give a short comment? How does story tackle each of them?
So when you think about how our brains are wired, and I don't want to get into sort of too deep into neuroscience, but we are wired for stories. So for years and years and years, for thousands of years, stories are ways that you capture people's attention. And when we hear a story, parts of our brain fire up and say, oh, that's interesting, I should pay attention. And good stories not only get the people to do that, but they get people to retell their stories to other people. So think about Russian stories, historical Russian stories. And why do they go on for years and years and years? Because they resonate and people tell them over and over and over again, right? So it's a way that we operate as humans. So at the same time, you've got that that sort of reality with the reality of modern world living, where we're on our cell phones 100 times a day. We look at hundreds of websites. Most of them we look at for less than 5 seconds. We're trying to do all kinds of things at the same time. So how do you, given those challenges, how do you as a brand break through? So regular marketing is not going to do that. People aren't going to pay attention. It doesn't matter to them. They're gonna move on as quick as possible. But if you can capture them with a story, if you can craft a story that makes them stop, because again, we're wired for stories, then that way you can get them to pause. And as a marketer, what we're looking for is the ability to make someone think for even a short period of time. Because a lot of people talk about marketing. We're in the age of the attention economy, trying to get people to pay attention. So how do you make that happen? Through storytelling. And that's the goal. That's why storytelling is so effective and so powerful.
Great. Thank you for commenting on this. Mark, here's like a short but a kind of trick question. I've read a couple of books on brand storytelling, and one of them was Story Brand by Donald Miller. You probably know this guy. And
Really well known.
yeah. Well, so I wanted to ask you a question. Like, are there any types of stories or like a startup or a company should tell, in your opinion, or is it more like a client story that is like a center, like Donald puts it in his book? So could you share with me your opinion on what stories to tell?
Right. So there are different types of stories for different types of companies, right? So when you think about it, when you're an early stage startup, what kind of stories do you tell when you haven't got a lot of customers, right? So think about that's a challenge. So there are stories about how, for those type of companies, there's stories about how you got started, right? Otherwise known as origin stories. So people love those stories about, I was in an elevator with someone and it got stuck and we started talking and we developed a business relationship, and that's how our amazing company got started. Those are great stories that you can tell as an early stage startup. Stories about what you think. So when you're a startup and you haven't got many customers, it's about, well, here's what I think about the industry. Here's where I think where my business is going, where I think customers are going, right? So those are thought leadership pieces. And the other thing for early stage startups is stories about your challenges. So you think about customers like Buffer or Groove, where they provide insight into some of the mistakes they've made, some of the successes they've had, some of the things they may have done differently, tips for other startups. So it's all valuable knowledge coming from their own experiences. And those are stories for those type of companies. As you grow, as you get more traction and attract more customers, then you can start doing things like telling stories about your customers. So, videos, case studies, testimonials. Then you can help your customers tell stories about you. So think about GoPro, for example, and their marketing is driven by customer stories, which is amazing, right? So GoPro doesn't even have to do any marketing. All their marketing is basically done for them by their customers. And then you get other people to tell your stories, and those are the media. So all of a sudden you start doing some amazing things, and the media wants to tell stories about you. So there's an evolution depending on where you're at, right? So you're always telling stories about your customers. You're always telling stories about your challenges. You just have to pick the stories that are most relevant to where you're at as far as your company's growth is concerned. So it's a lot easier if you're a big established company to tell all kinds of different stories. But when you're smaller, sometimes it's just about you and what you think and where you think the industry is going. So different stories for different types of customers and entrepreneurs.
Great. That's like an eclectic view. I love it. Thank you. I just stumbled upon one question in my head. Is there any structure like a hero's journey or some sort that you prefer to use, or is it more like a story is an art form? So how do you view it?
It's a combination of both, and I hear a lot about the hero's journey, and I appreciate elements of the hero's journey. You have to have drama. You have to have the hero. They go through this sort of journey where they face all kinds of challenges, and they don't know if they're going to overcome them. And all of a sudden, at the end of the day, there's a solution that makes them a hero and helps them make their business grow, and they're super successful. And that's a great narrative to have. At the same time, storytelling is an art form, right? It's not like, it's not like being a growth hacker and you measure everything and test everything. Sometimes it's subjective, and some stories work and some don't. But I'd say fundamentally is that storytelling resonates when you know your customers inside out or your prospects inside out. So you know what kind of things are going to, like, what are the things they need? What are their problems? What are their dreams and aspirations? So you can craft stories that talk to them and talk about the experiences that they envision having down the road, and some of the challenges that they face, so that whatever you're doing is about them and not about you. So as companies, we tend to be product centric. We tend to want to talk about how wonderful our product is and the great features that it has and how much it costs. And customers are, as I mentioned, are selfish. They're looking about them. It's like, who's going to serve me best? Who's going to make me the most successful? Who's going to deliver the most ROI so that I get a raise or a promotion, or my company is sold for millions of dollars? Whatever it is, right? It's all about what their needs are. So you gotta tell stories that talk to them and meet their needs and their goals. And after you connect with them on that level, then you can sort of say, here's how we deliver value. And by the way, here's how it actually happens. Here's the technology that we use, or here's the features that we deliver, so that you're not leading with you, you're leading with them. And then they'll want to hear the rest of your story.
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking about it for a while now, but that's a great answer. So, Mark, could we switch back a bit from the storytelling to the marketing bit, because I have like a question in the middle. You say that you have to choose the channels for storytelling, and if we don't call storytelling everything, like what we call story is a story and not all the marketing. So how can you choose the right kind of channel for the story? Like, could you give me some advices on this one?
So so don't get me wrong. I don't think you have to think about, I have to tell us like a classical story with every single thing you do from a marketing perspective, but it is sort of an important part of how you do marketing. But so how you decide on where to do your marketing has everything to do with, again, going back to your customer, right? So like knowing your customer inside out helps you figure out, like, I always say, the line that I say is, you got to party where the party's happening, right? So you don't want to be partying on Facebook. Customers aren't using Facebook, right? So you got to know from a marketing perspective, how do they learn about my product? How do they educate themselves? How do they become aware of my product? So let's talk about the classic sort of marketing funnel. So you start with awareness, then you go to consideration, decision, and advocacy. And so from an awareness point of view, how do your customers become aware of your product? Do they do Google searches? Do they watch videos? Do they get direct mail? Do they watch TV? Whatever it is, you gotta know those channels. You gotta identify those channels, right? And then from there, then you can figure out how to deliver marketing against those channels. Because a lot of companies, particularly startups, they embrace what I call a shotgun approach to marketing. They do all kinds of things. They blast out all over the place, thinking that if we do everything, then some of it's going to be effective and some of it's going to work, right? But the problem is that everything you do is mediocre. What I think you should do is a walk before you run approach. So less is more. So focus on a few channels that you think are going to really work, and do a really awesome job of those few channels. An awesome job of engaging and creating content and creating marketing that resonates. And then you have to measure the success of those channels. And if you have success, then you keep going, or you you add a few more channels. If you're not having success, then you got to reload on your mix. You got to go back to your customers and figure, well, what's working, what's not, what do we get rid of from a channel perspective, and then how do we move forward? So I have an exercise that's in my book, Marketing Spark. It's called List, Rank, Prioritize. And so the first thing you do from a strategy point of view is you list every single channel that's relevant. And I don't care whether it's channels that you think are going to be super effective or channels that are going to be modestly effective. You just want to list your entire marketing landscape. And from there, you want to rank them. So look at each channel and rank them on a number of criteria. Now, it could be how much they're going to cost. What do you think the ROI is? Like, how successful do you want to be? And how much effort's involved? Like, how many people have to be involved to do it? So you rank everything on a scale of 1 to 5. There's sort of a very simple scoring system, and the channels that rank the highest should be the ones that you should focus on first. So those fall into what I call the soon bucket, the now bucket, right? So now is the things that you're going to do right away to move the needle. Then the things that are ranked lower will be your soon bucket. So if your now doesn't work, you move to the soon, take some pieces from the soon, and then you've got the later bucket. These are things that don't rank very high, and you may do them in a year or 2 years, or you may never do them, because you don't want to be all things to all people. You don't have to be all things to all people, but you want to build some structure around when you do marketing and why you do it. And it's a very simple system to sort of identify what channels you should do like right now to drive your marketing forward.
Great, that's a great exercise. Thank you for sharing, Mark. It's great that you've started talking about this book that you have, like Marketing Spark. Could you tell me like a glimpse without showing me all the cards in your hands, like a glimpse? How is this book different, and what was your first purpose in writing this book?
So I wanted to write a book that was less prescriptive. A lot of marketing books just tell you what to do, or they talk about trends, but they don't give you sort of like the tactical guidance to actually help you get marketing done. So that's the goal of the book, to make marketing happen. So the first half of the book is around storytelling, brand positioning, messaging, strategy, so the fundamentals of marketing, so that you can sort of think about how do we want to approach marketing the best way. And then the last half of the book is, okay, so let's apply these business fundamentals to different channels. So if we're going to build a website, how do we do that properly? How do we think about best practices? How do we incorporate storytelling into how we do videos or infographics or podcasting or conferences or speaking? So it's all very practical. And the book is, one of the things I think makes the book different is has like dozens of worksheets and templates and graphics that tell you what to do. So it's not so much a book, but it's a guide. It's like a guide that sits on your desk. And so when you want to think about, well, I want to do social media, how do I do that? Or I want to refresh my website, how do we do that? Or I want to start a podcast, how do we do? So you go back into the book, and it gives you the insight you need to actually make marketing happen. And so, whether it's strategy or messaging or value propositions, there's all kinds of tools to help you move forward. And the book also has tools for every single thing. So if you're doing a podcast, here's all the services that you need to look at. Here's all the hosting services you need to look at. Here's all the hardware that you need. So it's like a guidebook. I mean, it's to help you get stuff done.
Well, I guess I know what book I'm going to get soon enough. Thank you for sharing. That's a great description. I hope you guys also enjoyed it. Mark, I have 2 more questions that I ask all storytellers I encounter, and I get really different answers. So the first one is, what would be your advice for someone who is starting to develop their storytelling skills? Maybe not in marketing, maybe in marketing. That's like, what would you like to answer? What would be your advice?
So number 1 would be to look at the entrepreneurs or the companies that you think are doing storytelling well, and really sort of to take a deep dive into what makes their marketing work. How are they using stories? So going back to my example of Buffer, which does social media sharing service. So look at, what makes their blog so good? What makes their infographics resonate so well? So look for storytellers that you aspire to be. So that's number 1, and get a sense of like what they do well. And the second thing is to really get a sense of how do I what are the ways that I can discover who my customers are and what they want and how they operate, and really do a deep dive into how do you get as much customer insight as possible. Now, it could be everything from interviewing your customers to monitoring what they do on social media, to reading books about, like about a particular demographic. For example, I'm fascinated by Gen Z right now. Like, all those young people between the ages of 5 and 22 that are going to be the future targets for us as marketers. And so I'm reading books and watching videos and talking to people, learning as much as I can about them. So those would be the two things that I would start with. So the fundamentals, look at who you aspire to be, and then look at the audiences that you want to attract. And the more you know about both, I think the better off you'll be.
Great. So it's like those advices are in the middle of marketing and storytelling. Well, they work in both areas. Great.
And sales for that matter too.
Great. Thank you. And the final question is, I've come up with a phrase, so I would like you to finish it. It goes like this: it takes one thing to get from a good story to a great story, and that one thing is
taking a customer-centric approach to marketing and storytelling, and knowing who your customers are inside out. I say this all the time. It's one of my mantras. But if you don't know your customers, then your stories aren't going to work.
Great. Well, that's a great answer, and I totally agree with that. You have to know who you're talking to and who you're telling a story to tell a great story. Okay, Mark, thank you so much for your time. This was an insight for me, and I guess the folks watching this will learn a lot from marketing and storytelling in business. And could you share maybe some of your contacts and where can we find you if someone wants to, stay in touch?
Sure. So my website is markevans.ca. So it's markevans.ca. You can follow me on Twitter at Mark Evans. And and basically you can search me on LinkedIn just using Mark Evans Daisy Intelligence, and that'll direct you to where I'm at.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate your time. Have all the great stories to come. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.